So we have the third installment in the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise. Well, fourth if you count the Knuckles TV series, which, by the way, no, I did not watch. So I should briefly give my thoughts on the first two, even though I've mentioned them several times. The first one, I despise. I absolutely hate it. I have no idea why people like it. Like, kids, I obviously get they like it because kids will watch anything, basically. But I don't understand how adults got into that crap. The second movie, on the other hand, improved in pretty much every department. It started focusing less on the human characters and actually focused on the characters from the games. For the most part, as you may know, my biggest problem with that movie was the 10-minute sequence that featured no Sonic, Knuckles, Tails, or Robotnik, and was just a bunch of stupid wedding drama that made absolutely no sense. So, now we have this third one, and since I did like the second movie, I was anticipating that I would actually like this movie quite a bit. I was anticipating it'd probably be the best of the three, and it would be an even bigger improvement over the second one, because they've learned from their mistakes already, so they don't have to repeat them. And I'll be totally honest, I didn't care for this movie at all. Not to say it's horrible, because it's obviously not an abhorrent trash fire, it's not nearly as bad as the first movie, but I didn't really enjoy my time with this. However, there is a specific reason for that. It's because when it gets to the action, it's actually a lot of fun. I think the fights, especially the fight in the middle of the movie in the city, is actually pretty cool. But the majority of the film isn't that. And let me get to my biggest problem with this movie, and it's the dialogue. This movie is so badly written. I could not stand the writing of this movie. And it doesn't help when the plot isn't exactly the most interesting thing either. I think had this been a Shadow movie just about his backstory, maybe the movie would have been a little better. But it's not that. We get flashes of that before getting a full montage for it, but that's all we get for it. And I do think Shadow is probably the best thing in this movie. I think Keanu Reeves is actually really good in this role. Except there was one scene, I can't remember which scene it was, but there was a scene where he had to try to emote a little bit more than just his typical, like, when he was doing, like, his, his, like, stoic villain version of Shadow, it sounded pretty cool. But when he had to actually, like, try to stretch his vocal range a bit, and I know he has some vocal range. He's done some voice work in the past few years and does pretty well. But there was one scene in particular where it felt like all of a sudden he just couldn't emote for some reason. I don't know what was going on, but there was one scene where he just did not work. But the rest of it, he works pretty well. Which is great contrast because Ben Schwartz as Sonic is annoying as hell. I can't stand his voice as Sonic. I really can't. And it especially showed during the city chase where he's chasing Shadow on the bike and he's throwing in a bunch of quips and everything like you'd see out of Spider-Man or something. And it's some of the cringiest things I've ever seen. It's really bad. The human characters are still here, but thankfully they're not in it as much and they're far less annoying this time around. Although, this does lead to easily the worst scene in this movie, and it's the break into, Gun, I think? Into the Gun headquarters, because there's so much wrong with this scene that it's insane. Now, first of all, this security is apparently pants-on-head retarded, because, so, the two human characters, they use, these, hologram technology to transform into the two. It's like her sister or something and her husband from the last two movies, because I guess they work for Gunn. But they walk in and they're denied access to get in because the place is on full lockdown. But he ends up letting them in because a black woman yelled at him really loud. You think I'm joking, but no. He literally lets them in because the woman disguised as her sister, yells at him and threatens to get him fired, even though she does not have the authority to do that at all. And yeah, it really boils down to he let them in because a black woman yelled at him. That's it. So, not only do we have retarded security. But then we also have Sonic, who's an idiot, because he knows in order to get through the shield, he has to go through very fast, otherwise the shield will disintegrate him, and instead decides to fuck around for a little bit and waste valuable time that he needs in order to get in, doing stupid shit. So, yeah, the heroes are stupid, the company's stupid, the villains are even stupider, because Robotnik, to get through the lasers, they have these, he made a specific suit for him and his grandfather, who's in this, that, reflect the lasers, that in and of itself is a decent idea, but they spend, an entire 3 minutes literally doing a dance sequence through the lasers instead of just walking through. And by the way, what happens when one of those lasers hits you in the head? And for the sake of plot convenience, it never does. All of the lasers reflect off the suits, never once getting them in the head. But on the off chance it does, you'd be fucked. So that's why, for the sake of plot convenience, they couldn't allow that to happen because they needed this stupid-ass dance sequence. And Robotnik is extra annoying this time around. In the first movie, he isn't really that annoying, which surprised me. He was one of the least annoying aspects of that film. In the second one, he was also just perfectly fine. There wasn't anything wrong with him. Here, he's extra annoying. And there's an entire scene with him and his grandfather after they reunite and everything that's like a montage of... It's one of those stupid montages where it's like the making up for lost time montage where they do a bunch of stuff as Robotnik as a kid, pretending to be a child and everything. I don't even know if this is actually happening or anything, or if that's just in Robotnik's head. I don't know. I started checking out when that happened. But again, it's like the final fight is pretty cool because when it gets to the action, this movie's actually not that bad. And that's something I liked about the second movie was the action and the creative locations they go to. Here, they don't go to any creative locations. Remember the place where the emerald was hidden in the second one, that deadly maze? That's kind of cool. Here, they're in London. That's it. That's really about it. They don't go to any fantasy worlds or anything still. And it's just in London, essentially. It's boring. It really is. That's another problem with this movie, is that it's boring. Again, when it gets to some actually exciting action, it's really cool. But when it gets to the drama or the comedy scenes, it's terrible. The drama, I don't care about, and the comedy just is awful. Especially... There are so many pop culture references in this, and they're so cringy. Now, pop culture references in and of themselves are not that bad. It depends on how you use them. For example, I'll give you one from the second one, where they're in the mountains and he's fighting Knuckles, and he briefly refers to him as the Winter Soldier, because he's like an unstoppable being, and they're in the snow. That one works because, one, it makes sense in context of what's going on, and two, notice I mentioned the word briefly. It was a brief nod to a movie. That's it. Here, they have to directly spell out what movie they're referencing when they reference a film. And it's really annoying. They do it all throughout the film. They do it during the motorcycle chase. They do it during the fight between the two Robotniks. And yeah, let's get to that as well, because the end of the movie, of course, has Shadow and Robotnik switch sides and fight back against old Robotnik. And I saw this coming from a mile away, especially with Shadow, because they're doing the exact same damn thing they did with Knuckles in the last movie. It's the Hedgehog, or Echidna in the last movie's case, where he's the villain throughout the entire film, but then Sonic gives him some speech about some lesson that was brought up earlier in the film, and they decide to be a good guy by the end of the movie. And I will say I didn't expect Shadow and Robotnik to die by the end of the movie. Though, will that stand? I really don't know. Because Jim Carrey did come out of retirement for this movie, unfortunately. And so this might be his last go-round with Sonic. Shadow, I don't know, but we'll have to see. And then there's the mid-credit scene, which is probably one of the worst mid-credit scenes I've ever seen in my life. Because it is one of the most shameless sequel setups ever. And I don't mean that it, like, teases the next movie. Like, of course, Amy shows up, like, that was rumored forever, that she'd be the mid-credit scene. That's fine. But what happens is that Sonic is attacked by Metal Sonic, which I thought was setting him up to be the villain of the next movie. And that would have been cool in and of itself, but what they do, they have him be, like, surrounded by, like, an army of them, and then Amy just blows them all up. So, assuming they're bringing Metal Sonic back for the fourth movie as the villain, it's already been shown that they can be taken out pretty easily, so I don't see why he'd be much of a threat in that scenario. So, like I said, this isn't a god-awful movie. Kids will like it just fine. I don't understand why adults are getting so sucked into this movie. I really don't get it. It has to just be the name recognition. Like, it's a name of a franchise I recognize. That means it's good, which is one of the worst mindsets I've seen on the internet nowadays, but it is a very common one. But this, I can't see myself watching this one again. I haven't watched any of these more than once. I may watch the second movie just to cleanse my palate of this one, and I probably never watched the Knuckles show. I probably will see the fourth one when it comes out in 2027, I think is when that's scheduled, so we'll see if maybe that one can re-steer the ship again. So that's all I got. I'm gonna give this movie a C-, because again, it's not horrible, it's not unwatchable, but I don't see myself watching it ever again, or thinking about it ever again. So that's all I got, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.